Good evening everyone, welcome to another Cyclone Chasers update. Tonight, the 6th of February 2014, my name is Chris Nitzo. Tonight, it's going to be a short one. We only have to talk really about the Western Australian tropical low that does have some potential of forming into a cyclone if it can get offshore. The other tropical lows that we are watching, there is one in the Coral Sea. It's likely to become a weak trough and likely to bring some widespread rainfall onto the Queensland coast. We'll talk a little bit more about rainfall later on in the broadcast, but really tonight the only thing we need to focus on is the WA or the NT current tropical low that will form that is formed and will push west into WA shortly. So currently over the next 2 days we've really seen potential here in the Coral Sea drop off, and so we won't see that form into any type of cyclone. There is some weak lows, weak eddies out here all along the Coral Sea. None of them will form into cyclones. In the Gulf of Carpentaria, conditions remain fairly good, but the problem we have here is that ex-tropical cyclone Fletcher is really a non-event anymore. The structure is gone. There is a surface circulation there, but it's pretty weak. So even though conditions are marginally favourable for development of a cyclone, the surface conditions aren't there anymore because it's just died off, or not really died off, but there's not much left of him. In the west, though, we start to see an increasing potential of tropical cyclone formation in the Joseph Bonaparte Gulf. Now, if the tropical low currently over the Northern Territory can push west out here, it may form into something more significant than just a low. Now, at this stage, most, if not all, the global model guidance keeps this low inland and keeps it tracking very close to the Kimberley coast before getting towards the East Pilbara and tracking southwards in response to an upper level trough system which will capture it and push it in a southerly direction. Once again, the big issue will be rainfall. If it does that track and follows the Kimberley coastline, we're going to be seeing falls of 200 to 400 millimeters along its track, and possibly falls even as far south as the goldfields further south towards the South Australia WA border. Could even see some fairly high rainfalls from it as well if in the longer term it tracks in that direction, which it should do, assuming that trough system will capture it, and it should do that as well. So folks, it's a matter of can it get offshore. If it can get offshore, don't be surprised if it develops rapidly. So if we look at the tropics, we've got a very, very defined monsoon trough right in through here, through the top end, through the Gulf of Carpentaria, through the peninsula, and out into the Coral Sea. We're seeing a fair bit of wind shear out here in the Coral Sea in the far eastern sections of it. We're seeing a fair bit of wind shear out here over the northern Gulf of Carpentaria, which is why Fletcher is not expected to do much. But over here to the west, we are seeing a very well structured tropical low starting to push in a west to west northwest direction, very close here to the border regions of the Northern Territory WA states. Now, if we look over to Queensland, we have fairly widespread cloud coming off this thunderstorm activity. Not much rain associated with that, but that's about to change for areas along the coast. And also for areas north of Townsville, for instance, they are copping a fairly decent rainfall. There is a weak disturbance just along the coast to the north of Cairns, around the Cooktown area, maybe just north of Cooktown in fact. And that's creating an enhanced region of convergence just to the south of it. So there's a fair bit happening out there in the Coral Sea, just none of it is looking like cyclone formation just because the conditions are quite unfavourable out there. If we look at the pretty picture from the Australian radar, thanks to Weather Zone, we can see the tropical low spinning away out here in the Northern Territory, and it's pushing in a west-northwesterly direction. We're seeing massive amounts of rainfall along the Western Peninsula, Gulf country, and also that heavy rain developing south of that disturbance, or continuing south of that disturbance near Cooktown. We're seeing a very, very much an enhanced area of convergence in the Queensland coast. So don't be surprised if rainfalls there may top the 100 millimetre mark by tomorrow morning. Once again, thanks to Weather Zone for the weather graphics here. The Bureau of Meteorology's Access G model we'll look at first, because it's not one of the more accurate ones, but it is one that we will need to take notice of, and I know that the Bureau do take some notice of this particular model, although it's not their favourite. This is 24 hours time. We see the tropical low right near the WA-NT border. In 48 hours time, we see that the system pushes very close to the Joseph Bonaparte Gulf. It's really touch and go, folks, as to whether it makes it out there on the water. Most of the guidance at this stage suggests it's just going to be on the coast or just inland, so therefore it limits its potential for cyclone development. And as we head to 72 hours, we see the system tracking westwards up here in the northern Kimberley, getting very close once again to the coastline. At 96 hours, we see the system tracking right down the Kimberley coast, probably located around Broome at that point in time, and pummeling the area with rainfall all up and down the Kimberley coastline. As we head to 120 hours, which is the 5-day period, we see it right along the coast of the Pilbara. Now look, that's only a matter of 50 k's further to the west, and she's a full-blown cyclone. It'll be called Gillian if it becomes one. And 50 k's to the east, and we still have a very strong tropical low. So really the model doesn't need to be that far out, and we're looking 5 days ahead. 50 k's is nothing to be wrong in a model 5 days out. So it's really touch and go as to whether this system can make it over the water. If it does, cyclone all the way. Looking at the GFS model, we see the system tomorrow morning right on the WANT, right at the base of the Joseph Bonaparte Gulf there. As we head to Saturday morning, we see it just remaining in that Joseph Bonaparte Gulf, and really anywhere within 200 kilometres of that is just copping a battering. We also see the GFS wanting to develop X Fletcher up a little bit in the southeastern Gulf of Carpentaria there. So X Fletcher is still something we need to watch, and we also see that enhanced area of convergence here on the northern tropical coastline as well. But we'll talk rainfall later, so let's not get me sidetracked here. At 72 hours, we have the tropical low in the North Kimberley, but over land, and really pushing very slowly in 96 hours to be located near Derby. And at 120 hours, we see it just inland of about Broome. So really, it's so close to the coast. It's one of those ones that we had a couple of weeks ago where we weren't sure, or probably about 3 weeks ago now, we weren't sure if it was going to make it onto the coast, and we knew that if it was going to make it onto the coast, it was going to be a cyclone, or if it was going to stay over land, it was going to create a lot of rain. Same thing with this one. If this one stays over land, she's going to create a lot of rainfall. If it gets over the water, it might centralise the rain a bit more, but it is very likely to become a cyclone if it can get out here. So looking at the European high-resolution imagery here, thanks to Weather Underground, and we have the tropical low out here located just to the east of the NT border. We also have the other tropical low, X Fletcher, here in the base of the southeastern Gulf, and we see that as the system tracks to the west over the next 12 to 18 hours, it does so extremely slowly. You can see here very, very slowly. You can see also X Fletcher is now located well and truly over land, so no real threat of redevelopment there. And also, if we just push a little bit eastwards, you'll see what I was talking about with that little disturbance here on the north tropical coast. You'll see it a little bit clearer here when we zoom in a little more. Just located to the just to the north of Cairns there, around between Port Douglas and Cooktown, and creating that enhanced area of rainfall over the next 12 to 24 hours. So as I say, don't be surprised, and even some of the models suggesting that goes out to 48 hours. So don't be surprised if we see some really big rainfalls out there. It doesn't take much to get some really good rain on that north tropical coast when we're in a convergent stream like that. So as we track this system through to Friday night, we see it not moving very much at all, but very close to that Joseph Bonaparte Gulf. Saturday morning, it starts to develop gales on the northern side of it, and we also have by Saturday morning, we also have X Fletcher completely washing out as part of the monsoon trough. So our focus then firmly turns to this particular system at Saturday night. We see the system really just sitting there, and just this whole area is just copping rain and rain and rain. It's going to just be one massive floodplain. I mean, it already is, but it's going to be one massive floodplain that is in flood by the time this thing's finished with it. As we get towards Sunday morning and Sunday night, we start to see it on its track towards the southwest. It's starting to be steered by something, but it's still very, very slow. It's not going to break any land speed records whichever way it goes. And then Monday morning, we see it is starting to get a bit of a move on now, located to the east of Broome. Now, whether it gets off the coast, though, is the key. And at this stage, the Euro says it's getting close, but not close enough. And so we see the system maintains pretty good circulation at the surface, and so we should see it creating a lot of rainfall still as we head through to Monday and Tuesday. But once again, look how close it is to land. If I was to estimate the distance there, it's less than 100 kilometers away from the water. So looking at that, you'd be a brave man to bet that it wouldn't cross the coast. And yeah, so just be aware that if it does cross the coast, conditions at that period, so if we backtrack to where its closest point of approach to the coast is, which is around about Tuesday, and we start having a look at what the area is around it. So we look at humidity. It's got some very dry air around to the west of it. So if it can pop off the coast around the Kimberley, it's probably got a better chance than if it pops off the coast in the Pilbara. See, this purple stuff here is very dry air. We don't like, cyclones hate dry air. And also, if we look at the wind shear values in that time frame, we see some pretty light shear all through this region. It gets up to a moderate occasionally in parts, but overall the entire area just off the coast is fairly good in terms of wind shear conditions. So really the issue I guess this system will have is, can it get off the coast, and can it get off the coast east of all this dry air? This shear line here shows us exactly where that demarcation line of dry and moist air is. So have a look at this shear line right here, and then have a look at where the moisture is. We can see here very, very clear line there of where the moisture is and where the dry air is. So that shear line or trough line, as long as the system remains east of that and gets offshore, it can form into a cyclone. If it gets west of that, chances drop drastically. As we look at the ensemble for 5 days' time, we can see that overall it's a fairly broad area of where this low could lie, but if it does lie offshore, it could possibly be a deeper system than a tropical low. So that's what the ensemble's saying. So we won't know enough yet until we see exactly how far west it can go over the next 2 to 3 days, and even then it's just going to be touch and go, folks. Look, the one key element here is it's not expected to become a very strong system because of its proximity to land. So even if it does pop just off the coast here, remember there's a lot of dry air, there's a bit of moderate shear just to the west there along that shear line. So overall conditions won't be fully favourable for it to form into anything very significant, but there is still a chance there of a Cat 1 or 2 system skirting the coastline if it can get offshore. If it doesn't get offshore, huge rain over the Kimberley, inland eastern Pilbara. Unfortunately, the area Karratha westwards at this stage, once again, sorry folks, not looking great for you in terms of how much rain you're going to get from this, but anywhere in the eastern Pilbara and the Kimberley and the inland parts of WA, overall you're going to be looking at big rains from this thing. For rain tonight, folks, we're going to go state by state, and we're only going to look at the 4-day period. We're not going to look further up because there's a lot of variation. So for the 8-day period, we'll just have a look at the broad scale pattern. But for the 4-day period, state by state, so you can see here big rainfalls on the West Peninsula, big rainfalls on the east coast of Queensland, anywhere north of about Townsville, looking at moderate falls, anywhere north of about Cairns, looking at moderate to heavy falls. So some really good stuff there. Also getting a fair way inland here in the northern parts of the Northern Goldfields, Upper Flinders as well. As we head to Saturday, we see continuation of moderate to heavy falls all along the east coast of Queensland. It's a continuation of heavy falls in the coastal regions of the Gulf country. Getting a lot more coastal though now out here as the tropical low pushes in a westerly direction. Unfortunately, not much of that seeping into the central west or any regions of central Queensland. We also start to see a trough system from the Coral Sea pushing westwards and starting to impact the coastline from about, as we said the other day, Bundaberg northwards. So we're going to see some rainfalls increasing in that region on the weekend. And sure enough, by Sunday, there we go. We have moderate falls all up and down the Queensland coastline. Obviously not as far south as Brisbane, but further up the coast, looking quite good, quite positive, all across the central coast with Sundays, all across the Herbert Lower Burdekin and into the North Tropical Coast and Tablelands. Although there is a easing up here in the northern peninsula as well, and that needs to be noted. Very heavy rain again in the Gulf country, so as that weak low tracks to the west, what it does is it actually creates a convergent northwest, northeast stream, and those winds are coming in and creating a lot of uplift. Even though the low might be very weak and way out here to the west, these northwesterlies, northeasterlies converge, create a lot of rainfall in that area during that time, and that's something that we didn't mention in the broadcast. By Monday, we actually start to see that moderate to heavy rain on the coastline pushing northwards, north of about Townsville through to about Cooktown. We're going to see some pretty moderate falls, possibly even heavy in parts. Really, folks, the trough system, it becomes a little bit more or a little weaker and really focuses the activity on the North Tropical coastline with some very isolated stuff further south. We actually see a fair bit of model guidance suggesting that there's going to be a little bit of rain seeping into the central west here, this region sort of Winton westwards, and that's pretty important too, particularly for the area around Mount Isa, Cloncurry, getting those 10, 15, even 20 millimetre falls, which is great. And look, the big thing with these is they're going to be quite widespread. They're not going to be those isolated showers and storms where one property gets 50 mils and the other property gets nothing. So it looks a little bit more widespread than that, which is great news for them. Unfortunately, nothing happening here for central inland Queensland, who I'm sure are starving for some rain as well. For the Territory, well, if you don't get rain and you're in the northern half of the Northern Territory, you are dead set the unluckiest property or person in the world. Because the Northern Territory, really anywhere north of about Tennant Creek, is copping a hammering of rainfall. We've seen massive flooding in this region. We're going to see more continuation of those really heavy falls. Look, 50 to 100 millimetres over 24 hours tomorrow, all through this northwestern region, the VRD area. Really going to see a lot of rainfall in this area. Also, the Gulf country is going to see a fair bit of rain. Look, the one place that's missing out a lot is the Arnhem Land district. They are missing out on a lot of the worst part of this, or a lot of the best part of this rain. And that's going to continue on Saturday. They're going to be missing out most of that as well, as most of the rain remains in the central northern districts here and also the Gulf country. And we see a lot more rainfall in the Territory border regions here on the western top end coastline and the far northeastern Kimberley. And that's all associated with that low that we spoke about for the first 12 minutes of this broadcast. Now, as we head towards Sunday, we continue to see very heavy rainfall on the western coastline. We see falls getting further south as well here in the Territory, into the central parts of the Territory, into the desert regions even of the Territory, and the continuation of falls on the Gulf Coast. But also, once again, the Arnhem District really are not looking great for rainfall again. They sort of seem to be caught between these northwesterlies and these moist northerlies coming into the Gulf. There's really nothing coming into this region here. So the activity over here is going to be a lot more isolated in the northern Roper, Macarthur and Arnhem District. On Monday, we continue to see a very heavy rainfall on the west coast and in the Gulf country region. Once again, though, this same area is missing out on the heavy stuff. They're still getting light stuff and isolated stuff, and in those isolated stuff, you might get some very heavy rain. But overall, the model guidance doesn't pick that up, so all it shows is these low values of 1 to 5 millimetres. Also getting as far south as Alice Springs, some of this rain. So believe it or not, as I say, if you're in any part of the Northern Territory, north of the desert region, and you're not getting any rain over the next 4 days, don't go buy a lotto ticket. On Friday, across the northern districts here of WA, we see the Kimberley region looking at some moderate falls of rain. We also have that little low that we were talking about near the coast, near Broome today, that little convergent area pushing offshore, which is creating a little bit more rain out here in the Timor Sea. On Saturday, as we look to the weekend for this region, on Saturday, we see that region of convergence pushing further out. Look, we don't expect that to form into a cyclone, so don't be too concerned about it. But we are still looking at the Columbaroo, Wyndham, anywhere really north of Broome, expecting some showers and storms, some heavy stuff in the very, very far northern parts, though, on the Saturday. As we head to Sunday, we start to see the low, although very, very slowly, is drifting to the west, and so we'll start to see this rainfall pushing a little bit further to the south and west, where the activity around the Derby region becomes a little bit more scattered rather than isolated. And so anywhere from a line from Derby to Halls Creek is looking at some fairly high rainfalls. But once again, the really far northern region of WA is expecting the worst of it. On Monday, the low continues to track in a southwesterly direction, and so we start to see those moderate falls pushing further to the south here, anywhere north of about Broome, once again to just south of Halls Creek. So really the whole Kimberley region is expecting some rainfall there by Monday. So that's the wrap up of state by state, but as we head towards Monday to Thursday next week, so as we head into the early to middle part of next week, we're still going to see some pretty good rain along the Queensland coast in a very moist east to northeasterly stream. The high doesn't really kick in too much dry air in this region, so we're going to continue seeing some fairly widespread showers on the coastline. Unfortunately, with that sort of stream, not much of that gets inland, so we're only looking at isolated showers and storms inland. The Gulf Country region remains reasonably active, and that rain will seep fairly well south and east of the Gulf. And also a long way south here, even towards Alice Springs, we're going to see some heavier rain as we head through to Monday to Thursday period. The Gulf Country itself, a little bit of an easing in the Queensland region of the Gulf Country, but anywhere sort of west of Normanton, we're going to see, west of Burketown, I should say, is going to see some of that heavier stuff. In the Northern Territory, we're still going to see 50 to 100 mils over the western top end. We're still going to see 25 to 50 mils in that 4-day period over most of the territory, but some of that heavier rain seeping down into, as I say, the desert districts of the NT. We're also going to be seeing some very heavy rainfall in the Kimberley region as that low starts to track in a more southerly direction. That rain, unfortunately, at this point in time, not getting anywhere west of about Port Hedland, the real rain. You might get a couple of showers west of there, but overall not looking like getting anything significant there. But look at this, some of this rainfall here in the South Australian WA border, 50 to 100 mils. That's phenomenal rain. Anyway, that's the wrap up, folks. We won't be, unless the tropical low looks like it's getting offshore tomorrow, we won't have an update tomorrow. We will have an update on Saturday for you. I'll take the night off tomorrow. But as I say, if that tropical low looks like it's going to become a cyclone, or there's a fair indication that it will become a cyclone, we'll have another update for you tomorrow night. Thanks for watching tonight, and we'll talk to you again on Saturday. Good night.